I'm going to resist the urge to talk unbelievable, irresponsible amounts of trash today. But for the first time in a long time, the Texans are like actually a good football team. So can you blame me and all my fellow Texans fans watching this feel the same way? Like, we got through the dark period of, he who shall not be named. Not going to lie, I and many other Texans fans checked out for a long time. I don't want to call it a divorce, but it was a separation that was teetering, right? And then, got me flowers. Did what it took to bring me and many other Texans fans back, i.e., getting rid of the right people, bringing in the even more right people, nailing the quarterback pick. Like, for the first time in a long time, I'm confident in coaching, front office, personnel, ownership. Like, there was a stretch where I wasn't confident in literally any of those things.
Nope.
It's good to be a Texans fan for the first time in, God, too many years.
We'll talk about just how solid they are top to bottom. You already alluded to it, but it's this recent rise is not one thing, right? People say, oh, it's CJ Stroud. Right, but it's CJ Stroud and Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans and the other talent they've assembled. It's Bobby Slowick. It's all these things working together. It's one of those sort of perfect moments when we talk about floor and ceiling, like the Texans found their ceiling and they found it fast.
And that's the thing that really gets me is like how quickly it went from the most bleak situation in the league, where nothing was good, nothing was working, incredibly toxic situation all around. Franchise legends really didn't want a whole lot to do with the franchise. Like, even Dre was out. Like, it takes a lot to piss off Andre Johnson. And in 24 months from there, we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's incredible. So, Lovie Smith, wherever you are, we're building you a statue, bud, because not only did he get rid of he who shall not be named, but he also set the franchise up to get CJ Stroud, who is... Screw it, I'm going to say it. CJ Stroud already looks better than Deshaun Watson ever did in a Texans uniform. And I am including that Deshaun rookie year where, there was that incredible game up in Seattle where he was dueling against Russ and they went back and forth. It was like just an amazing game. I remember it was like the week before I got married, actually. And then he tore his ACL immediately after that. But even as good as Deshaun was in his rookie year, even as good as Deshaun was when he led the league in passing, the numbers aren't quite the same for CJ Stroud, but just watching him play, he did things even as a rookie that I didn't even see Deshaun do in a Texans uniform. And that's saying a lot. And of course, now Deshaun is not that anymore. While the Texans have a young ascending quarterback who has a virtually unlimited ceiling, I didn't think I was ever going to see a quarterback like that in Houston again, let alone in the first 8 weeks he was, even a professional football player. Like, I'm telling you, the Tampa game in week 8, from then on, it wasn't just like, oh, the Texans have something here. It was, oh my God, the Texans have something. Like, I almost don't know how to describe it. Like, it just all came out of nowhere.
Well, it went from being, he's a good rookie quarterback, to he's probably one of the best rookie quarterbacks, to we should probably stop saying rookie.
Yeah.
After week 8, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league in terms of, if you're talking about top half, absolutely. By the end of the season, top third, I don't think is ludicrous to say, looking at how easily he did it. And I'm not going to say what he did was easy. How easy he made it look is really important. How smooth, how composed, how hard it was to fluster him, how hard it was to get him to make the right choice, and how infrequently he did that. All very rare.
Every decision was a good decision. Every ball was just incredibly catchable. He just throws such a catchable ball, but he can attack every blade of grass. Like, he's got a huge arm, but it's an accurate arm. That's what's so rare about it. He can throw from any platform. He's great under pressure. He worked under center. He worked in the gun. He worked in the pistol. Like, there was nothing he couldn't do from a footwork perspective. He's incredibly smart. He's a great leader. Like, I've had to pinch myself multiple times. Like, is this dude real?
Yeah, waiting
Like,
waiting for the other shoe to drop because you don't typically see those things. And when I say rare, talking about all those things and especially the combination of all those things. We've seen all of those things from rookie quarterbacks in individual instances.
mhm.
But what we haven't seen is all of them in one package as quickly as we saw them with CJ Stroud in Houston.
We have a lot to go over today. Obviously, might be a little bit of a meaty episode because I'm gonna take my time with this one. But we got scheme talk, personnel talk, going over the draft, going over free agency, going over every move the Texans have made to take the step from playoff contender, division winner to legitimate Super Bowl contender, which they are now. Don't get it twisted, they are. But we're gonna go over everything they've done since January to get to that position to hopefully challenge Kansas City and Baltimore for the top of the AFC. So if you're a Texans fan, enjoy today. This is our day. For the rest of you, tough shit. I'm going to take my time with this one. So, Jay, roll the intro. Welcome back to the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm Brett. That's EJ. Behind us is the Puget Sound up here in the Pacific Northwest. Doing our little home and home here in this 32 episode series where we go team by team, breaking down everything they did last year, as well as this offseason, as well as what they might do this upcoming season. If you don't know what we do this time of year on Bootleg, that's what we spend all of our time on, is doing deep dives into every single team so that you guys don't have to do all the research yourself. You can just watch this series and hopefully be as prepared as possible for the upcoming season. EJ, it's Texans Day. How you feeling?
Not as good as you, but pretty darn good. Texans are a fun football team to talk about again. And as you said in the opening, it's been a while. We haven't had that. We were hopeful last year at this time during the series. We thought, if things go right, we really liked D'Amico as a coach. We thought that was a tremendous choice, but it was still like, man, all the pieces have to fit into place. It is a rookie quarterback. They do have some lackings in terms of roster, and they overcame all of those incredibly quickly. And yeah, we're going to talk about them in a very different light. We talked about them in a sort of hopeful, maybe-ish light last summer, and I think this summer we're going to talk about them in a we fully expect light of we fully expect them to be there at the end of the year. We fully expect them to challenge for the top spot in their own division, certainly, and that's the vault to the playoffs, right? That's the vault to a high seed. It is a stunning transformation in terms of how quickly it's happened and how complete.
It's not just, they hit on the quarterback,
Nope.
but, they're still trying to build around him. It's they hit on the quarterback, and they have an incredible receiving core, and their offensive line is really deep. Like, they weren't even fully healthy last year, and they performed pretty well. And their pass rush is really good. And they have some young DBs that we think are incredibly talented. And they added even more in the draft. And they added even more in free agency. This was a team this time last year that when we broke down the roster from top to bottom, we're like, hey, man, like they got some pieces. Like, this isn't as bad a team as people think. Like, they're actually probably going to be pretty solid. Then they ended up being more than solid. But, we were kind of on it last summer of like, it's not horrible. Like, Nick Caserio has done a pretty good job replenishing the talent that didn't exist the 2 years before that, right? Yep. It's just they took that next step a year earlier than we thought they would, and now we're on track for an incredible sophomore year in this new regime. At the time, I know a lot of people questioned, okay, why do the kind of crazy trade at the top and you're giving up assets to Arizona to do quarterback and Will Anderson back-to-back? Like, could they really afford to do that for a rebuilding team? I think that question was answered pretty quickly. Like, if you think you're getting blue chip players, like, fuck the picks. Like, just get the blue chip players. That's probably a good idea.
That's what picks are for. I think people forget about that a lot of times. Like, everybody I want extra draft picks and trade down and get more picks and, third round compensatory picks, and everyone's picks. Sure. But you got to do the whole point of having those picks is getting good players with them, because you can trade picks down the line until you have a dragon's lair full of picks and blow them and you got nothing. It's vaporware. Nothing happened. You didn't change your team. So again, if you're sure that, CJ Stroud was a guy, and they were, and if you're sure that Will Anderson is going to be as good and continue to get better, yeah, you mortgage the picks and say, yeah, but we got what we were after. We got good players. So can you fault us? And the answer is nobody ever does. If you get the players, nobody cares about the picks. If the players turn out to be garbage, everybody cares about the picks. So, it's just what they're for. And when you hit them, nobody cares.
It's the exact reason why, we've had criticisms about the A.J. Brown trade, which obviously everybody had criticisms about it, but the process behind it, like they were trying to replicate what Minnesota did
right.
With Diggs and Jefferson, which like Minnesota threaded that needle. That was amazing by them. But like the point of getting the first round pick back from, say, a player like A.J. Brown is to get a player like A.J. Brown. So it's like,
just a cheaper one.
Minnesota did it, but that's about the only time it's worked.
It's hard to do. I mean, we talk about, I don't like it when people say the draft is a crapshoot, but the draft is absolutely an inexact science.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of variables, and you're not going to nail it all the time. And people that nail it 30 to 40% of the time are considered very good at it. So that's a lowish success rate. That just means it's hard to do. You can see an example of, I don't want to say good process, but process that worked out in the end and say, yeah, we'll do that. People say it all the time. We'll just, pick the right quarterback. Well, if it was that easy, everybody would do it, and not everybody does it. So you can have a good thought process and still get derailed by the fact that, hey, it is a very difficult thing to say this very good college player will be a very good pro player in our system.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot of variables, and we see teams, people say miss or whatever else, but after a while, it's just like, look, that half of these guys are not going to work out typically. If more than half work out, you did amazing. If just under half work out, you were very solid. If 1 out of 10 worked out, you're out of a job.
Before we get into 2023 and everything that happened last season, and there was actually a few different phases of the 2023 Texans. I think the September Texans and December Texans were two very different teams. But before we get into all the 2023 stuff, I do want to thank our wonderful sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, for making this entire series possible. In the first place, if you guys are fantasy football players, best ball summer is going on right now. There are millions and millions and millions of prizes in all of those best ball events and tournaments going on Underdog Fantasy. Maybe you're a pick'em type person. They just launched Pick 8. So not only can you do, 5-person pick'ems, you can go up to 8-person pick'ems now with like these just crazy payouts. Of course, they have flex picks on those as well. They have season-long pick'ems. So if you're looking at, Stephon Diggs or Nico Collins or CJ Stroud and you're trying to pick higher or lower on season-long totals, they have those live right now. They have NBA, they have hockey. Well, those are going to be done by now, but they have golf, they have baseball, they have like any sport you can think of. So, while you're watching sports this summer, while you're getting ready for the NFL season, if you want to play along on Underdog Fantasy, you can find pretty much anything sports related on Underdog Fantasy. If you're new to it, you can use promo code BOOTLEG. That will get you a special pick'em in the lobby. I'm not sure what the pick'em special is as of the time of recording this, but I'll throw that on screen right now. And you're also going to get up to $250 in bonus cash as well. So thank you once again to Underdog for sponsoring this entire series. And with that, EJ, I give you the floor. Take us through 2023.
I feel like we should put a nice bright spotlight on you for this one, and you can just bask in the glow of what was 2023.
It's been a while, man. It's been a while.
2023 Texans 10-7, first in the division, home record 6-3, very solid road record as well, 4-4, and over the last 5 games 3-2, certainly held their position, even gained a game, and that literally gave them the division. We've got a couple of metrics to try and put all of that into perspective or break it down. Really, how should they have done and how did they do? The how should they have done is called QBS, or quarterback support. It's a stat that I came up with Arjun Menon from PFF a couple months back. We'll put a link in the description to break it all down. But basically, it's 5 statistics, 3 offensive, 1 defensive, and 1 special teams to really say, how much did this team do? How well did they set the table for their quarterback to succeed? How well should they have done given their support relative to their peers in the NFL? It's a 0 to 100 score, 0 being the worst, 100 being the best. Houston ended up at 32.3 on that scale, and that placed Houston 22nd out of 32 teams. So just, you could say bottom 10 in quarterback support, which means you would expect their power score, which is the methodology that we introduced to you last year of saying how well they did by taking 6 numbers: rushing rank, passing rank, rush defense, pass defense, points scored, and points allowed. Just assigning their NFL rank. Where did they finish? 10th, 20th, 30th, whatever. And then averaging those out and giving them a score so that we get their power score, which is really how they did, as opposed to QBS being how they should have done. Texans, 26th in rushing offense, 13th in passing offense, 6th in rushing defense. There's the D'Amico influence. 20th in pass defense, 14th in points scored, and 11th points allowed. So that gave them a power score of 17.8. You want the lowest possible power score. Again, you'd love to be number one in all those categories. Nobody is. And that gave them a ranking of 17th. And this is where it gets really interesting because, again, QBS, 22nd, how they actually did, 17th. This team overachieved very strongly.
And I think a lot of the QBS comes down to like the injuries they had early on in the season. They were down 80% of their starting offensive line, and pass blocking efficiency, factors heavily into QBS because it's literally the bedrock of supporting a quarterback is pass protection. They didn't have any of their dudes healthy for a big chunk of the year. Non-quarterback rushing EPA is a big factor in that. Devin Singletary was pretty much their only like truly consistently effective back. Dameon Pierce, as much as we love Dameon Pierce, kind of took a step back last year in terms of like perfect coverage rate or like how often receivers are perfectly covered, like which I believe factors in like proximity of a DB to the completion or incompletion, right? That's factored into QBS. Special teams, average field position is factored into QBS. Like all these things started out not great.
Yep.
And then got progressively better throughout the year. So they started out probably a lot lower than 22nd, ended up probably a lot higher than 22nd, but averaged out to 22nd. But because of how good D'Amico is as a coach, because of how good Stroud is as a quarterback, because of how great Slowick was in his first year calling plays, they punched above their weight, literally and figuratively, to become a 10-win team that maybe shouldn't have been a 10-win team if you're just looking at the base ingredients and all the injuries they were dealing with. So that's why I say like September Texans and December Texans were two very different things. In September, okay, they're getting their doors blown off by the Ravens because they were a young team missing a bunch of dudes. By December, nobody really wanted to play them. Hell, by October, nobody really wanted to play them, just ask Tampa. But I loved that you could see the growth from month to month, from week to week in this team. They were young, both in the coaching staff and in terms of players, but they grew, they gelled, they improved. And by the end of the year, even if we all kind of knew like, okay, 2024 wasn't the time. By the end of the year, you were looking at 2020 or 2023 wasn't the time. By the end of the year, you were looking at 2024 saying like, that's a pretty darn good stepping stone of a season.
And they're farther ahead than we thought they'd be, is what we were saying at the end of 2023. And they're really strategic. This is important. This was a team last year when we talked about it at this time. We said they have holes, and they did. They had holes. Teams that overachieve, that have holes, find ways to make the most important thing the most important thing. And the rankings they had in Power Score that were the highest are the ones that mean the most in the modern NFL. They were 13th in passing offense. Again, tickling a top 10 passing offense with rookie head coach, rookie OC, rookie quarterback. That's amazing. The other one is points scored. They were top half in points scored. They're 14th. Like, if you have a damn near top 10 passing offense and you're above average in scoring points, by the way, your points allowed was real close to top 10. You were 11th. You're almost a top 10 scoring defense. You have those three metrics, you can spackle over a lot of holes in the walls, right? You can say, look, we're not good in all these areas. And the Texans still have room to grow, and we knew that last year. But the reason that they ended up with that spread between how they should have done and how they actually did, and that was a positive difference for them. We'll talk about teams throughout this season that had a negative difference, should have done better than they did, was because they did it right in key areas, and that propelled them, especially in the second half of the season.
when looking at all like the schematic data and how the Texans kind of made this work, and especially Bobby Sloak. We brought up Bobby Sloak a couple times. He was kind of like the secret sauce, in my opinion, to all this, because he really did a good job of walking a fine line between giving an almost excessive amount of support to a young rookie quarterback while also demanding a lot from them at the same time. And what I mean by that is if you look at how their offense was structured from a schematic perspective, all right, they used 21 personnel more than almost anybody. They were fourth in 21 personnel, meaning fullback was on the field all the damn time. We are running the ball from 21 personnel under center all the damn time. And they had a very diverse run scheme, bunch of outside zone, inside zone. They ran duo a lot. They ran power a lot. They ran counter a lot. Pretty much the only thing that they were not in the top 2/3 to top third of the NFL in terms of percentage of running it was pin and pull, which makes sense because that's more of a shotgun run type of, like, you see more pin and pull from shotgun is what I'm trying to say. They weren't in shotgun that much. They were in under center more than most teams. But they had a very diverse run scheme. They used fullbacks a lot. And even when the run wasn't super effective for them, again, we said 26th in EPA, they committed to it. And they let defenses know, like, we are running the ball when fullbacks are on the field, right? When Andrew Beck is on the field, they actually had the second highest run rate when fullbacks were on the field. However, they also were one of the most effective play action teams out of that personnel grouping. They were one of the most effective play action teams overall because they committed to it so much that they almost forced defenses to over-index on it. And this sounds like a very old school mentality of like, okay, yeah, you show the run to suck linebackers up, open up, like you run to establish, or you establish the run to establish the pass, like that old school kind of saying, and people got away from it of like, no, you should just pass all the time. Like early down passing is best. Statistically, yes, that is still true, but it was a very 90s and early 2000s mentality in Houston of like, we're going to run the ball even if it doesn't work because we trust that CJ Stroud, when we give him opportunities to do these hard play action fakes, maybe we only have 2 or 3 receivers actually running routes against 5 coverage defenders. We trust that CJ is going to execute that fake extremely well, and he's going to, manipulate these linebackers to step up. And then when he turns his eyes around to get rid of the ball, he's going to manipulate those linebackers with his eyes to get the fuck out of the way. And you saw that in the Colts game. Like him and Zaire Franklin, man, they were battling in terms of, eye contact. Like you saw CJ just move him all over the field, and Zaire was in hell trying to keep up with these dig routes. It's kind of interesting how they've kind of gone back and forth this offseason on various podcast appearances. But like, it's true, man. You watch the tape, CJ had the Colts in hell. And he did that all year. Like he was so good at using his eyes to open up windows for his receivers in the middle of the field, especially off of play action. And so when I say Bobby Slowick did a great job of almost holding CJ's hand in terms of using a bunch of, play action and 6 and 7 man protections, we are slowing down the pass rush. We are going to protect you as much as possible. Like, yes, he did hold his hand in that regard, but he also demanded a lot from him because he's like, we only got 3 receivers running routes. You got to move people. And he did. He was throwing no-look passes. He was using his eyes effectively. He had incredible accuracy and arm talent that if he had to hit tight windows, he could hit those tight windows. Every blade of grass, every area of the field, on platform, off platform. It's so interesting how just that Texans offense, it was a high degree of difficulty and a low degree of difficulty at the same time in different ways. But I loved that marriage between Slowick and Stroud because Slowick clearly understood what Stroud needed from him, and Stroud clearly understood what Slowick needed from him. And that's how you end up with one of the best passing offenses in the NFL, despite all the injuries and despite a fairly young receiving core that hadn't proven it yet, going into last year at least.
I think of it as very high leverage.
Mm-hmm.
You're leveraging opportunities, and you're not going to have as many of them because you've got less receivers in the routes, and you're creating moments. Bobby Slowick was like custom crafting. There were like bespoke moments
Mm-hmm.
for CJ Stroud to say, this is your moment, but you got to hit it. There's one. And in order to hit it, you need to do these things. Side note, whisper, whisper, which I know you can do well. So I'm going to put you in a very high leverage moment that plays to your strengths, but you got to hit it. That's the difference between coaches and players, right? I'm going to create you this table, this painting, and you got to come in and add just the right color at the right time. And it's also, I think, one of the clearest examples of what analysts have been saying for years, which is you don't have to have an effective running game to be effective at play action. Play action works even if you can't run the ball very well.
Mm-hmm.
You look at their EPA, they're 26th in the league. Yes, they committed to it, and yes, they, did it a lot. They weren't very good at it. And so play action works whether or not you have a very effective running game if you create the right moments and if you hit them. And the Texans sort of did all three of those things. They committed to it, they created these moments, and then CJ Stroud paid them off.
There's also a big reason why they brought in Joe Mixon, because they're like, all right, we're going to run the ball a lot again this year, but like we kind of need it to work more, just a little bit.
We'd like it to be, how should I phrase this, better?
Yeah, we could just be average, man. Like that's all we're hoping for. Like Devin Singletary really did his best, and I love Devin Singletary, I always will, but like they needed it to work a little bit better so that not everything was on CJ all the time.
Yeah.
Defensively, it's pretty similar defense in a lot of ways to what we see the Jets run. If you watch the first week of this series when we did AFC East, we talked about the Jets, how they kind of just played it super straight, a lot of four-man rushes, not a lot of blitzes. Same thing for the Texans, which of course, D'Amico and Saleh, pretty similar because they came from the same place. But it's just play quarters, rush four, play cover three. If they're in more run-oriented personnel groupings or formations, like you play cover three to improve, improve your run defense. Like cover three is the coverage you play if you want to stop the run. And they only did that when they really had to. But predominantly for every other situation, it was, we're going to be in quarters. We're going to let our edge rushers go hunt. We're going to let our linebackers, make plays in space. We're not going to be super fancy. They were very low in blitz rate. They pretty much never called simulated pressures. They just lined up and played. And for how effective they were, despite not being fancy whatsoever, I think is kind of a testament to, again, the defensive roster that Nick Caserio has built, because he has collected a bunch of really fun, explosive young talent. But B, I think it's also a testament to D'Amico Ryans and his coaching staff just instilling good fundamentals in his players. Because if you're not going to be fancy, if you're not tricking the offense, you better just be really damn good at what you're asked to do. And all of his players executed their assignments very well. And it kind of just came down to that of like, we are lining up. You know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. See if you can beat us. And for the most part, teams struggled to just beat them.
It seemed like when we were watching the Texans defense last year that it was the sort of poster child for, we're going to keep it simple so you can play fast.
Mm-hmm.
And those seem like two tenets of what D'Amico's really trying to instill in all of these defenders. We'll talk about Caserio in a minute because I am really impressed with the job he's done. And he came in as this sort of enigmatic figure coming out of the New England front office, and you're never quite sure who was doing what there. So it's like, I'm not sure what he's really good at. I'm not sure what he's responsible for. Now that he runs the show, we'll see. And we have a couple of years of book on Nick Caserio. We'll talk about those players that he's built or that roster he's built. But D'Amico really seemed like, all right, first year, we're going to be effective. In order to do that, I'm not going to overload you. I'm going to keep everybody's assignment simple. You got to know your assignment. And then I expect you just pin your ears back and go. Like, I don't care who you are. Like, know what you're doing and do it fast. I don't even really care if you do it wrong, as long as you do it fast, like with effort. We'll correct the wrong later. But what I don't want you doing out there is hesitating, right? I just want to keep it as streamlined as possible. I don't want to say basic, but I'm going to give you not too much. Everybody's going to have a few things, and I expect you to do all of them fast.
Coach Vass has a saying of, even if we're wrong, if we're all wrong together, we're right.
Yeah.
Like, that was the core of this defense of like, even if we're in the wrong thing, if we're not in the best possible look to handle whatever they're throwing at us, if we're all wrong together, we're right. Because I trust you guys to play fast, and like if they get a catch on us, rally and tackle.
Yep.
Like just rally and tackle. Like
And
make
don't have
them
those
beat
breaks. That's what I
Yeah.
love about that saying from Bass is like, if we're together and we're all going the same way, even if you said it's not the best particular fit, there's still not a break, right? You might get your catch, you might get your yards, we're going to tackle, but you're not getting a 40-yarder down the field with everybody standing around with their hands up going, what? I thought it was yours. I
Yeah.
thought it was yours, right? Everybody was like, well, yeah, it wasn't the best. It lined up better for them than it did for us, but like, forget it, kind of have that cornerback mentality, get back to the next one, have your assignments, play fast. They're going to get some. We're going to give them to them. That's fine, but we're going to get ours too. And that seemed like the way they approached doing that.
It's just about making offensive drives last as many plays as possible, because the more an offense is exposed to having to run plays, the higher the chance of Derek Stingley getting a pick, Will Anderson getting a sack, something going wrong for the offense. Like, offenses love 5-play drives. They don't particularly love 15-play drives.
Yeah.
Because if there's a 15-play drive, it means that they are riding the struggle bus. And D'Amico Ryans loves when offenses ride the struggle bus. Which brings us, to the coaching and front office breakdown. It's a natural transition to it. I love everything about this front office. I love everything about this coaching staff. I am dreading the day that it is inevitably going to get broken up, because at some point, Bobby Sloak's going to be a head coach. At some point, wouldn't be surprised if Matt Burke is a head coach. Like, this staff will get poached. So I'm going to savor 2024 while I can, because damn, this is a good group.
And we talked about how quickly they've gelled. Really does start at the top with Nick Caserio getting to hold the reins, call the shots, whatever you want to say about it. Weren't sure what he was really responsible for coming out of New England. He was super well regarded. Just thought of as very solid football guy, very well experienced, but it's like, now that he has sort of no oversight, right? Now that he is the final buck stops here, big desk in an organization, how is he going to handle that? How is he going to approach it? And what I've seen from him so far is extremely impressive. He has good process. He seems open to input from the right areas. He seems to be able to eliminate the noise and make solid decisions. The handshake between him and D'Amico, which we talk about all the time, a strong handshake between coach and GM is essential. It doesn't look like it could be stronger right now. It looks like they have a singular vision and they're both seeing it exactly the same way. That's rare. Again, extremely impressive work for a young, not someone young in football, but a young GM to have this much success this early. And we've said it for the past couple of years in our draft wrap-ups, like, I don't know, it looks really good to me. We'll know in 3 years, but early returns are extremely strong on Nick Caserio. D'Amico Ryans, I don't think we could have been higher on him last season as a coaching candidate. Like, he was our top candidate.
He was the guy, yeah.
If you got him, I remember the day the Texans got him, and I pinged you, and I was like, I wish I could pull up that DM. And
we don't suck anymore.
I was like, dude, you got him. Like, we both know he's going to be great. Like, it might take a couple of years. I think we said that because we thought that at the time, and the rest of the roster hadn't been assembled, but we knew in our heart of hearts that D'Amico was going to be a very good head coach. He's just that guy.
It's so funny. Beyond just D'Amico being a great coach, I've been going through a bunch of like the old All-22 that, NFL's been kind enough to send me lately. And so, it's like 2009 Titans because I'm working on a CJ2K thing. And, they also sent me 08 and 09 Texans All-22 because I'm working on something for Dre because he's going in the Hall. And with all this mid to late 2000s All-22 they've been sending me, there's a bunch of games where it's like I'm watching D'Amico as a young player. God damn. He just whooped ass, man. Like, it's so easy to forget how good he was. I mean, he's Captain Miko. Everybody loves Captain Miko, but after so many years, it's easy to forget because the Texans have actually had a pretty strong linebacker legacy over the years, right? Like, Cushing came in, Bernard McKinney had some really nice years. They've got some young guys now that I really like his talents, but You go back to the OG. I mean, D'Amico got drafted in like the 4th or 5th year of this franchise's history.
Yep.
And you watch him against those like high-powered Titans run games, just destroying everybody. Like, God, he was good.
Yep.
And to immediately go from, okay, great player with the Texans, great player with the Eagles, got into coaching, was on a rocket ship basically from the start. Like, even when he was a QC, people were looking at him like, oh yeah, that's a head coach.
It's happening. Yeah.
Legendary leader in Houston. Like, everybody knew once he got his shot, like, he was going to be this kind of coach. And I am just ecstatic that his shot was with the team that drafted him, because we are extraordinarily lucky to have landed this kind of person for the organization.
Yeah. Still looks like he could strap it up too.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
You could give him a couple reps out there.
Yeah.
He'd hold up.
If we're doing the coaching MMA round robin tournament, like, I'm penciling him into the Final Four no matter what.
Well, especially now that Vrabes is out of the picture. Like, him and Vrabel, like, pretty close match, but now that Vrabel's gone,
Yep.
it's like D'Amico and Dan Campbell in the final.
Yeah, it's not a hard stretch. In terms of the offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, we've talked about him at length. Extreme fans of his work, and yes, every year you get with him is going to be a gift, because I don't think there are going to be very many before somebody taps him and says, hey, come do that at a higher level for our franchise. Matt Burke, the defensive coordinator, again, handpicked by D'Amico. You knew a defensively based head coach was going to pick a DC who he fully trusted and knew his system inside and out. Matt Burke showed that in the first year. Frank Ross, the special teams coordinator. In terms of notable coaches on offense, Danny Barnett is the assistant head coach and running back coach, 7th season as an RB coach with the Texans, which again means he survived a coaching transition, really a regime transition. That's always extremely impressive for a coach. 41 years of football experience as a player and a coach. He's been coaching for 27 years. Bill Lazor, the senior offensive assistant, which is a great sort of grand poobah title of offense in the NFL.
He's a fixer, is what he is.
He is. He fixed, when he was with everywhere he's been, when he got more heavily involved or basically had decision-making or play calling capability, the offense was more effective. He did it stops in Cincinnati. He did it certainly in his time with the Bears.
Miami as well.
You could see when it got handed over from Nagy to Lazor, you could tell. You could literally see on the field, oh, Lazor's calling plays right now. So a tremendous resource for a young coach like Bobby Slowick to lean on somebody like Bill Lazor, who has tons of experience and tons of good experience. Ben McDaniels is the wide receiver and pass game coordinator for this team. His dad, Tom, was the 1997 USA Today National Coach of the Year and is in the Ohio High School Football Coaches Hall of Fame. He coached with Greg Schiano at Tampa Bay and Rutgers, John Fox in Chicago, Harbaugh at Michigan. So he's been exposed to some very solid coaches, and he is the younger brother of Josh McDaniels.
I was wondering if it was that same family.
It is. I would say the more successful of the two at this point.
Well, I don't know, because Josh, I struggle with Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels, the OC, was spectacular. And especially working with a guy like Tom Brady, because it's interesting how they're both hotheads, but they complement each other very well. Like, They're going to yell at each other like crazy, but I think they both fed off of that. Bill O'Brien was the same way, right? Like, he and Tom yelled at each other all the time, but they fed off of each other, because I think they kind of required that intensity, right? Josh McDaniels, the head coach, not remotely the same thing.
No.
So I don't know. I would never, ever, ever hire Josh McDaniels to be my head coach. But if I had a grizzled old veteran quarterback that could handle Josh McDaniels, I would love him as my OC. But I'm happy that the other one is in Houston.
Fair enough. On defense and special teams, Corey Undlin is the defensive pass game coordinator. His second season in that role after coming over from San Francisco with D'Amico. He's a former DC of the Lions. Players he's coached have earned 5 Pro Bowls and 4 All-Pro nods in the seasons that he coached them. Bill Davis is the linebacker coach, 29 seasons in the NFL. Comes over from the Cardinals, where he held the same role last year. And you gotta know, if D'Amico Ryans is green checking a linebacker coach,
you're probably pretty good.
He's down with the program. Yeah.
Well, given all that information, everything we've talked about so far, how the scheme is structured, how the front office and coaching staff is structured, some of the personnel talk, and we'll get into more personnel talk in a second. But given everything we've talked about so far, that brings us to the underdog top 2. I know you guys are used to hearing underdog top 3. I think this week it's underdog top 2. Because if you're looking at CJ Stroud and literally every receiver on the team,
Yeah.
like this segment is supposed to be about like, oh, what's the best value?
Yeah.
Like you ain't getting discounts on any of these guys. Like CJ Stroud is QB5 on Underdog Fantasy right now. Nico is wide receiver 15. Stephon Diggs is wide receiver 18. So they have 2 receivers in the top 20. Okay, good luck. Oh, maybe you're going to get a discount on Tank Dell. No, fuck you. You're not. Tank is wide receiver 26.
Yep.
No discounts, no values. Everybody's all in on this passing game. So it's the underdog top 2 because the only value you're going to get is either going to be A, Dalton Schultz at tight end 13, which is honestly probably just appropriate.
I was going to say that's about, if it's a value, it's a very small one.
I'm struggling to find one, right?
Yep.
The only one that might be like an actual legitimate value is Joe Mixon at RB15. Not because I think he's going to, be super dynamic in terms of yardage or catches or anything like that, but I think this is going to be an offense that has a lot of red zone trips. And when you're drafting a running back in the NFL, for fantasy football, of course, this whole segment's about fantasy. But if you're drafting a running back in fantasy, you're really drafting 2 things. You're drafting, okay, how often is this offense going to get inside the 20? So he's going to get touchdown opportunities, let alone inside the 10. And how good's the offensive line? I think the offensive line, when they're healthy, is pretty darn good. So that's a good one for Joe Mixon. But the key thing here is opportunities. And I'm talking high leverage opportunities, inside the 20, inside the 10, inside the 5. Like he is going to get red zone touches. That is what he is going to do in this offense. He is going to score. So if you're taking Joe Mixon, you're taking him because you think he's one of the running backs in the NFL that has the highest likelihood of getting 10, 12, 14 touchdowns on the season, which is an increasingly rare thing.
Yeah.
You go back to the mid 2000s, you got guys putting up like 18, 20, in LT's case, like 28 touchdowns in a year. Like you don't see that anymore.
Nope.
It's very, very rare. So getting a guy that you think has a legitimate shot of getting double digits, let alone mid double digit touchdowns, that's hard to get. I think Joe Mixon has as good of a shot as anybody just because of where he is. So RB15, a little light for me. Other than him, probably not getting a discount on any Texans player in fantasy. It just is what it is. Like the hype train's real.
Yeah, success comes with a price, at least in terms of fantasy value. And Mixon is not a low mileage back at this point. He's extremely talented, always has been. He has to eke 1 or 2 more years out here, and this has to be the one. He has to stay healthy, and he can't drop off. And a lot of running backs drop off at his age, so even that pick is not without risk. RB15, is a little bit low if he can stack the touchdowns, but you're also working against the reason that number is where it is you're working against age, and you're working against mileage, right? It's not the years, it's the mileage.
Yeah, I mean, he got fed a lot in Cincinnati. Which, I mean, as he should. He's a very talented back. But,
very talented.
This is it's not his first or second or third or fourth rodeo
Yeah.
at this point. Like, he's been around. And he was one of the bigger free agents they brought in, which is a natural transition to our free agency section. We'll go over the losses, then we'll go over the retentions and the third-party gains. EJ, I give you the floor. Who's going?
Jerry Hughes, the ageless Jerry Hughes.
Love him.
Love him. He just always puts up numbers. Speaking of defying the age barrier, right? He's 36 years old. Couldn't tell on the field. He's still going to do what he does, which is bring you pressure in very specific situations, but he's going to do it extremely consistently. So Jerry Hughes is gone. DHC, DeAndre Houston Carson, former Bear, played 42% of the snaps. More of a glue guy in the secondary. Not one of those, they can't replace him guys, but played very well in that sort of second or third safety role for the Texans.
Is he 31 already?
Yeah.
I just saw that.
Yeah.
I remember when he got in the league.
Yep.
God, he's 31.
Yeah.
Man, I'm old.
Played a lot of downs, both on the base defense, especially in the latter half of his career with Chicago, but was a core special teamer throughout his entire time in Chicago. Very valuable player. Again, more glue guy than star, but you are going to have to replace those. He's very smart. D'Amico's defenses have typically rehabilitated the careers of a lot of second safeties or third safeties. Tayshaun Gibson, again, strangely enough, came from the Bears to the Niners and suddenly was good again, right? It was like, what? Oh, D'Amico, right. Okay. So Adrian Amos, safety, played only 31% of the snaps and has fallen off since his time in Green Bay. He's not back with the organization. Malik Collins goes to the 49ers in a trade, 61% of the snaps and a very defined an important role in that defense. He was the guy that was stopping the run on the inside, gap and a half. You could count on him for that. They're going to have to replace him. I think they have a plan to, but again, has to happen. Sheldon Rankins goes to the Bengals, 50% of the snaps. Tavier Thomas, a guy we pumped up pretty hard last year in this section. You can't pay everybody. Tavier Thomas goes to the Buccaneers, where I think he's going to be a really good fit.
The battle between him and Izzian for that nickel spot is going to be interesting. I think Izzian at this point is a better player overall, but if, again, knock on particle board that we have here, it's not wood. If Christian Izzian goes down, like Tavier Thomas could slide in and be just fine for them.
Yeah, very skilled player, underrated. And then Devin Singletary, who you mentioned, heads to the Giants. It's not about the percentage of snaps for him. It's that he was the lead back, but obviously Mixon coming in made him expendable. George Fant, left tackle, goes to the Seahawks, 80% of the snaps. Jonathan Grenard, this is the you can't pay everybody. Grenard went off last year. He had his ascension under D'Amico, really put himself on the map in terms of the NFL with other decision makers, and somebody was going to pay him, ends up being the Vikings. Then Blake Cashman, who played, again, really well as a linebacker.
This one hurts.
He also goes to the Vikings, only played 57% of the snaps, but the way he looked, again, the way he ascended as a linebacker, key position in D'Amico's defense, made it almost impossible for the Texans to keep him.
I was a Blake Cashman truther since he was coming out in the draft, and he went to the Jets. But when he was coming out from college, I was like, all this kid does is make tackles. And not like in a, okay, you're getting 100 tackles, but they're all 8 yards down the field kind of way. Like impact tackles. Rangy, instinctive, explosive player. I love Blake Cashman. Wish he would have stayed in Houston, but they have other plans at linebacker. They had a whole bunch of young dudes. I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, damn, Blake Cashman's really good. Jonathan Grenard, they kind of swap for him and Danielle Hunter. Like, they both just change places. I think it was Aaron Wilson, who's very plugged in Houston. I think he was the one who reported that the Texans coaching staff, they love Grenard as a player. He's very talented. They felt like he freelanced a little bit too much for their taste. Not that you can't freelance as a pass rusher if you got two-way goes and everything like that, but if you are rushing past the depth of the quarterback consistently, and D'Amico hates when his edge rushers, get to the depth of the quarterback and just keep going, it's like, no. If you get to their drop depth and you're not immediately either holding your position or at worst countering inside, like, we get pissed off. If you're selling out to the edge every single time and you're giving those little escape routes through the B gap because you're going 5 yards behind him, like, that drives D'Amico crazy. So very productive, very good player. I think he didn't, how do I say this diplomatically? While he was productive and while he was good, he didn't have the level of discipline within the structure of an overall pass rush that I think the Texans wanted from him. So they were okay with him swapping places with Danielle Hunter, who is very disciplined, and he's a wily old vet. He gets it. I think some people thought Grenard was sack hunting to get a big deal, which he did get a big deal. He got $19 million a year, whereas D'Amico's like, just stop him from fucking scrambling, dude. Like, I don't need you to get sacks. I need you to just hold your up. God. Yeah. So, again, there was frustration there, but he's still a really good player.
If you're right, when you freelance, it looks really good.
Yeah.
On paper. But again, when you get to the film room and you say, what's most important to me is that you don't go past the depth of the quarterback. Don't do it, right? Does it again the next week. Maybe gets a sack, maybe gets pressure. You're like, okay, it looks good on the stat sheet, but what could have happened here is this. And you say that over and over again, it gets tiring. And it also sets a player up for regression, right? That, yeah, you were right a bunch of times this year, but we say this all the time, sacks are fickle. You might not be right next year. You might be doing the exact same things and not paying it off, and then we're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And we're not into that.
And Danielle Hunter, if you could say anything about Danielle Hunter, he does his job. He does exactly what his coaches want him to do, and he's very good at it. So I love that signing, which is probably a good transition to retentions and outside signings. In terms of in-house retentions, Dalton Schultz, like we knew he was going to stay. He and CJ are best buds at this point. Great veteran tight end. He's going to be in Houston for at least 2 years, so I'd love to see that. Kaimi Fairbairn, God, he's 30 already. I remember when he was a rookie. Long time, very effective kicker for the franchise. He's back once again at $5.3 million. Noah Brown, the best wide receiver for money can buy. Absolutely love Noah Brown. He's also back. Dario Ogunbowale, 30-year-old running back / kicker, which with the new kickoff structure, I'll tell you what, folks.
I knew this was coming.
He's an incredibly important player on this team. If Kansas City's using Justin Reed for kickoffs because they need somebody who has experience tackling or just the ability to tackle, period. And again, I love Kaimi. You don't want Kaimi being your last line of defense in the new kickoff structure where you're essentially coming from the depth of a safety to make a tackle one-on-one. Like you're running the alley. I trust Dare to do a lot more of that than Kaimi. So it's very possible we see Dare Ogunbowale be the kickoff guy for Houston this year, at least when they're not just trying to, bang it through and get a touchback. But
Sure.
If they're actually trying to play the field position game, it's probably Ogunbowale. So that's why they re-signed him, because they need that skill set. In terms of outside additions, the bigger names, Joe Mixon, we hit on, signed just shy of $10 million. CMC's getting 19. So, if you're getting roughly half of the top of market, I'm cool with that. Stephon Diggs. Somehow we've not said the Stephon Diggs name yet in this entire episode.
It's time.
Through a trade, $22.5 million. Do I think he's going to be the number one? I don't. And I know CJ, did the thing that all quarterbacks do, which is I got 5 number one receivers. Like that was a quote he literally gave. I got 5 number ones, just like Ohio State. I'm going to make it work. Like from a practical point of view, no, Stephon Diggs is not going to be the number one for this team. Nico's going to be the number one because Nico is really young, really explosive, great contested catcher, has the chemistry, runs every route. Like Nico's a dog, right? But as far as number twos go, it's hard to do worse for like a high end number two than Stephon freaking Diggs, right? Like, yes, he's on the back end of his career. He's 31, but he's still an effective player. You look at the first 8 weeks of the season last year in Buffalo, he looked like just as good as ever, right? Things kind of tailed off towards the end of the year, but like it's still Stephon Diggs. He's still really good. But we are now seeing Diggs enter the same phase of his career that DeAndre Hopkins is now in, which is, okay, Calvin Ridley's the one. Nuke is now the wily old vet number 2. Stephon is going to be the wily old vet number 2 while Nico's the one in Houston. And then Tank is, God, as far as number 3s go in the NFL, how many have a better one than Tank freaking Dell? So that's kind of how I see this receiving core shaking out. I think they needed just one more guy this offseason, and Diggs was their one more guy. And now I feel really, really good about this receiving core.
That's the biggest point for me is it's not adding Stephon Diggs was not about adding the number one. That's right. It was not about adding an alpha. It was about strengthening the room. And there is no way to argue that adding Stephon Diggs to this wide receiver room did not significantly strengthen it, protect it against injury. You talked about Noah Brown. Like, again, if Noah Brown is your 3 and Tank Dell is your 2, and then you bring in Stephon Diggs is definitely your 2, Tank's your 3, Noah's your 4. I know why CJ said what he said, but he's getting a lot closer to the truth because Stephon's there.
It's just a really good balanced room between youth and explosiveness and just veteran savvy.
Yep.
It's hard to find this balanced of a receiving core. It's a really, really good room. They also brought in Folo Fatukasi from the Jaguars, run stopping extraordinaire. They had to address that particular role on their interior defensive line. They got that with Fatukasi. Miles Bryant, they brought in from the Patriots. He's one of those guys where I feel like he's been okay for a long time. He's never lived up to the potential that I thought he could have reached, but at the same time, he's played for 4 or 5 years at this point. He's carved out a nice career for himself. He's cheap. That's the big thing for me. He's cheap.
You know what he is to me?
What?
He's the DHC replacement.
Probably, yeah. Probably. Like, not going to play a huge amount of snaps, but...
you can play him all over. He's not going to get pantsed for the most part. Is he going to make impact plays? Is he going to be the guy that's stirring the drink? No. Is he going to be the guy that's screwing up? Not typically.
They also brought in Ben Skoranek, one of the only wide receivers / fullbacks in the NFL, because that's kind of like how the Rams used him.
Yeah.
This signing was really intriguing to me because, again, they used so much 21 personnel last year. Part of me wonders if they brought in Skoranek, which was via a trade, by the way. Like, this was them actively pursuing the Rams to get Ben Skoranek. Part of me wonders if they brought him in because they still want to run a lot of those two-back run concepts, but from 11, and they kind of want to do some of the stuff that Sean McVay was doing with Skoranek, which was, okay, we're going to come out in 11 to get you into your nickel looks, and then we're going to put Skoranek in the backfield and run ISO because we can. Like, I think Slowick was heavily inspired by that. I could see them doing that. They also brought in Azeez Al-Shaair, who, is best buds with D'Amico. He's going to be an immediate impact player and an impact starter for them at linebacker. He was their answer when they lost Cashman, or rather their choice over Cashman. Again, I'm a big Cashman guy, but Azeez is pretty freaking good, so I'm all right with it. Danico Autry, wily old veteran edge who is just an absolute monster, like consistent pressure getter. He's for a long time had one of the higher pressure per snap rates in the NFL. You can play inside, you can play outside, just crushes the pocket and is disciplined, by the way.
Strong edge setter, very strong edge setter.
Daniil Hunter, another very strong edge setter. Between Hunter, Will Anderson, and Danico Autry, I get the sense that D'Amico's type at edge is pocket compressors.
Yeah.
More so than flamethrowers off the edge.
Yeah.
He wants to make space tight for the quarterback because quarterbacks in tight space make mistakes. I think his big thing is if we get a sack, great. But if we get a quarterback so panicked by their lack of space to move that they throw us picks, that's even better. So I kind of think that's his approach to it. And it's also, again, I think a reason why they were totally cool with Grenard going to Minnesota. Well, they brought in 2 more power edge rushers in Hunter and Autry.
These last 3 that we talked about, Al-Shaair, Autry, and Hunter, this trio is like a personification of the handshake between Caserio and D'Amico.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is yes, yes, and yes. Like, do you see it this way? I see it this way. Do you want this guy? Yup, and yup. Where I think these meetings were really short. Like, hey, we're thinking about bringing in the guy we wanted to bring in last year. He went to the Titans. He's your pro. Yeah. Azeez? Yeah, get him.
And when it comes to Hunter and Autry, I mean, it's really more mercenary contracts. They're going to get out of them after 2 years, which is about when you're supposed to be paying Stroud anyway. So,
and it's 30 and 34.
Yeah,
again,
they're older players.
They understand that each NFL team is reset every year. You're going to have your losses. You're going to have to fix those. And even the Fatukasi signing, like, look, we lost Collins, or, we traded Collins, whichever. Like, we moved Collins, and we need to fill that role. Like, Fatukasi is affordable. He is strong in that role. He's not going to be more than he is, but they don't need him to be. And again, this is just like very smart, focused signings where you can see the role, you can see what they're doing. Like you said, financially, you can see them setting themselves up because, look, we know we're going to have to pay CJ. We're not going to get ourselves hamstrung with long contracts for aging veterans. Like, it's just smart and focused football, and it's really impressive.
I don't know if Nico Collins actually showed up on this list. I'll make sure he does, because like they they extended him, but also you kind of knew he was going to be a Texan for a long time anyway. So I don't know if we actually put him on the retentions graphic. We'll make sure we do. But considering what the receiver market is now, as of Justin Jefferson getting $35 million and CeeDee Lamb probably getting 35, maybe $34 million when he eventually signs. Waddle got big money. Both the Eagles receivers got big money. Amon-Ra got big money. Giving Nico 24 on a 3-year deal, which is essentially, honestly, this deal is great for both sides because I think it's the Texans saying, thank you for your service. We'll only do it for 3 years so that you have a chance to then come back and get, 30 plus on your next round when you're still in your prime. We're going to reward you temporarily, but at the same time, you're going to take a slight short-term discount for what we think you are, which is a legitimate, top 10 receiver in the NFL. He's not paid like what you would think a brand new top 10 receiver in the NFL will get paid, like, 24 compared to 35. Like, he's getting 2/3 of what JJ's getting, right? So he's taking a slight short-term discount, but it's only 3 years in exchange for probably going to make it back the second time around, after 3 more years of Stroud putting up ridiculous numbers. Like, then he's going to come back and be like, all right, now I'm 37. Like, that's the price now because that's what the receiver market is. So short-term gains, long-term gains for both sides. Love that deal for Nico Collins.
And he gets to stay with CJ Stroud. Like, he will take less money. Receivers understand that you're going to take the most money you can get, but not to go to quarterback hell, right?
Yeah.
Not to go to a place where your career is going to get hamstrung because the guy can't throw it to you when you're open. Here, he's like, when I'm open, I'm getting the ball, and that's going to help my stats, going to build my case. I'm going to have success, which players want to have as well. They want the money first, and rightfully so. Short careers, get your bag, but not at the price of, look, we're going to go, we're going to be a 6-win team every year. I got my money, but I'm also going to be miserable.
What do you think he would have gotten on the open market? Let's say after Jefferson set the market, which, keep in mind, by the way, when we were at the Combine, which is when, all the agents are talking, all the team personnel are talking, the number that was floated for Jefferson of what was likely was 32.5, ended up at 35 because that's just where the receiver market went in the last 4 months. So let's say Nico was a free agent right now.
Yeah.
What's he probably getting? 28?
28's my number. I would say that because he's going to slot in right after the sort of top 4 guys that we had this discussion yesterday about, do we believe anybody will get traded before the season at this point? We're in, early June. Do we think any of the big guys are going to move? Do we think that Ayuk's going to move? Do we think that T. Higgins is going to move? Do we think that Courtland Sutton's going to be not a Bronco at the start of the season? Like, any of those sort of top tier guys, and I would say even above Sutton in terms of more potential. Sutton is more of a known. He's farther into his career. Nico still, some people are going to be looking at him and saying, oh, he's got room to ascend yet. He hasn't reached his full potential. So I would even put him above Courtland, but like right in that neighborhood of like just below Ayuk, just below T, like, and that puts him at 28, 29.
Yeah. So again, they're getting a discount. That's what I'm trying to convey here is that's a damn good deal for everybody. So the Texans crushed March, as Nick Caserio always does. Sorry, I know, homerism coming through.
Yeah, sweatshirt's rubbing off on you.
I mean, he does have consistently great drafts.
I'm not going to say you're wrong.
Being honest. So, he crushed March. He crushed April, in my opinion, getting over in the draft. This is kind of an interesting one because I think a lot of people looked at the Texans draft and they were expecting a little bit more. And when I say more, I really mean flash.
Yep.
For me, this was knocking it out of the park because it was very meat and potatoes draft. It was, we're identifying very like niche roles that we still need to be filled on this roster that we don't have filled. Let's go out and get these particular prospects that are good at these very particular things that we really, really need right now. Not a whole lot of flash, not a whole lot of like huge names that were taken of like, oh my God, how did he fall that far? But I loved this draft. It was a very Nick Caserio draft because it identified particular things that this coaching staff clearly wanted and needed. And then he attacked those particular roles aggressively and got players for those particular roles.
We talk about that handshake being really strong between GM and coach as one of the most necessary things to be a good NFL team. And again, this draft, just like we said about free agency, reflects that strong handshake. They started off with Kamari Lassiter, the big corner out of Georgia, in the second round. Their first pick was at pick 42. Loved that pick to start it off for them in the second round. Blake Fisher, the other offensive tackle out of Notre Dame, second round at 59. Again, having 2 second-round picks is a very strong start for them. They felt like they needed more tackle depth. Again, they saw what happened when they didn't have it last year. They said, we don't want to be in that position again. Let's go get a good young tackle who maybe eventually can be a starter for us. Maybe can be a starter right away for us. We'll see. We're going to put our best 5 out there. He's going to give us, again, a stronger room, just like we said about the wide receiver room. Kalen Bullock, the safety out of USC in the third round at 78. This, to me, says the Texans want to play a lot of single high.
Well, they didn't play a whole lot of cover 3 last year, but I think it's also beyond just, okay, we're going to play cover 3, we need to stop the run, which I talked about earlier. Like, they played cover 3 against very specific formations and personnel groups when they needed to, but they didn't do it unless they kind of had to.
Yeah.
From a run defense perspective. They didn't do it against the pass, at least against passing formations, passing personnel groups, and I think it's because they didn't have Kalen Bullock,
yeah.
Right? Like, they didn't have range and ball skills on the back end to be your post safety. Now they do. Wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more cover 3 from them this year.
Right. And you said at the top, this is Caserio looking at what his coaching staff has said we want to do. These are the roles we need to fill. This was one of them. We need a guy that can fly around in the back end and absolutely be that sort of air-to-air patroller as a safety. Kalen Bullock, one of the best ones in this draft for that, fills a very specific role that they didn't necessarily have last year and is going to allow them to play I'm not going to say a wider range of coverage, but a wider variety of coverages more often. They're going to be able to go to that bag and feel more secure that we can get that ground covered because Kalen Bullock can fly. Cade Stover, the tight end from Ohio State, a lot of people were really high on him. I thought this was appropriate value. 4th round, 123, gives them a good second/third option at tight end, somebody that can grow into the position eventually. They hope become a number 1. A lot of people were talking about him as like a late second or third round tight end. It was a little rich for me. 4th round, I thought very solid value. Again, Nick Caserio coming in and saying, yep, that guy's still on the board. We have that role. Again, we want to fill it. We think this is a good match. It's like waiting for the board to fall to your matches, not reaching for them. And that's what probably felt best about this draft for me out of the Texans. Then Jamal Hill, the linebacker, former converted safety out of Oregon, way down in the 6th round at 188. Again, we've got 5 more picks to go, and they're all in the 6th and 7th round. But again, they didn't kind of stop adding guys who I can see the fits for. They go and get Jawar Jordan, the running back out of Louisville, undersized at 205. That's not 205 pounds. That's pick 205. If he was 205, he probably would have gone,
a lot higher if he was 205.
But he replaces a lot of what Devin Singletary is able to do in terms of speed runs, elusiveness, not so much power between the tackles, but he reminds me a lot of Singletary coming out of college. Like, Singletary rounded out his game in the pros and was able to do more. Jawar Jordan has a lot of the same similarities that Singletary did as a college runner, and I can see them saying, hey, that gives us a piece of that. And again, it's a value way down in the 6th round at 205. Then Solomon Byrd, the edge out of USC. This one I love. We love this player. Got to meet him at Shrine Bowl. Got to see him work there against very quality tackles. Got to talk to tackles he worked against in USC practice.
Oh, they hated him.
They were like, man, that guy does work in practice. It doesn't always show up on game day. Again, and when you said that about D'Amico and what he wants out of his edges, it's Solomon Byrd.
It's power. It's relentlessness. And by the way, when we say, it didn't show up as much at USC, it wasn't his fault.
Right.
It was just kind of the nature of how the defense was structured. But, like, he's an ass kicker. And when the leash came off in the actual Shrine Bowl in the game, where it's like full contact, I am rushing constantly, he got, I can't remember how many total number of pressures, but sack after sack. Like, he demolished tackles in the game. Just an incredible speed to power. We talk about like power to weight ratio for cars. Like, his power to weight ratio is nuts.
It doesn't look on the field like you think it should based on his measurements.
his frame, I get it. It's not the biggest guy, but when he gets up and under a tackle, they go backwards. He was one of my favorite like value edges in this class.
100%.
I did not think he was going to be a 7th round pick. Like I thought he was going to go 1, maybe 2 rounds higher than that. To get him in the 7th round, I thought was a fantastic pick. And I know we're talking about like 7th round edges, but like this is not a normal 7th round edge to me. I get similar vibes to when the Broncos took Jonathan Cooper from Ohio State, also in the 7th round. Back then, I actually, if you go back and you watch that Broncos season preview episode from that year, when I was like, there's no fucking way Jonathan Cooper should have been a 7th round pick. I feel the same way about Solomon Byrd. Like, this is a significantly better player than his draft status. He's going to make the team, and he's the exact type of edge they like, of just power, pocket compression, effort, relentlessness, discipline, smart, all that kind of stuff. I do want to touch on Kamari Lassiter, by the way. People look at the testing numbers and they're like, the Texans took a corner that runs 4.65 at 42 overall. He does not play 4.65.
No.
Does not play 4.65. And he's here's the thing. He's sub 190. He's 186 with like sub 9-inch hands, ran 4.65. Everybody's like, this athletic profile sucks. If you look at the agilities, the shuttle and the 3-cone, he is top tier in the agility drills. He tackles aggressively. Like he tackles like he's somebody who weighs 215. All right. He's a great tackler, super smart, super disciplined, exceptional fluidity and explosiveness in short areas. He doesn't play 4.65 on tape. I think he plays like 4.5 flat on tape, which is plenty. Fine. That's enough.
Especially at his size. And I felt like people just overcomplicated it with Kamari Lassiter.
Way too complicated.
Look at the tape. He's in the SEC, right? This is not some, North Carolina Ag and Tech corner who you're like, oh, he's got size. Maybe. No. Played at Georgia. He played against everybody that, your team drafted at receiver. And he massacred a lot of them. Like, it just got too complicated. You're like, no. I don't care about those numbers. Not because I don't care about those numbers for corners, because on tape, it doesn't look like that. Against the best competition he could play against in college, he did it consistently. He did it with physicality. He talked about smarts and discipline. Like, just don't overcomplicate it. It's a big, tall SEC corner, plays really hard, doesn't get burned a lot, so you can say whatever you want about how he ran on, turf and Indy, but, like, on tape, he did fine.
And if you're just watching the field drills at the combine, and we were on the field when he was going through field drills, and you're watching him do the W, you're watching him do the gauntlet, you're watching him do the T drill, the wave drill, everything like that. Or it's not the wave drill for DBs, but it's like that equivalent of like, oh, we're going to point and then you're, driving whatever direction we point, right? I don't know what the actual name of the drill was, but you're watching him go through all the DB drills. And how many times were you writing down in your notes like Lassiter, great feet, great hips, Lassiter, great feet, great hips? Like, he looked so good in the field work. Like, I didn't care what the 40 was.
Yeah. And I didn't even care about the field work. He was one of the guys that if he'd looked terrible in the field work, I would have kind of gone, why'd that happen? But I still would. That drives you back to the tape, right? And I was so good with the tape coming in to the combine that I was like, if he looks even average during combine drills and shorts, I don't really care. The only thing I would have cared about is if he looked terrible. And then I would have looked for an explanation, because I would have said, he doesn't look like this on tape. And tape is always the first thing. I was so solid on tape coming in that I didn't even really care. And that's why I didn't care about the number. I was like, plays faster on tape. I don't care.
He's just a really, really good player. Honestly, the only pick out of this entire draft, Lassiter, Fisher, Bullock, Stover, Hill, Jordan, Byrd, Harris, and Henderson, the only pick out of all of them that I was like, early for me was Fisher.
Yeah, Blake.
But he's a developmental tackle. He's not going to play this year. Well, ideally, he's not going to play. If he plays, that means somebody got hurt, and then we're in trouble anyway. But he was the only one where I was like, okay, fine.
And I think that was more driven by supply and demand. We've talked about this in this particular draft several times, is that second tier of tackles, which Fisher was clearly in, went faster. Or went as fast as a lot of people predicted it might, which is faster than the average fan thought. So some of these names get pushed up the board because it's like, well, we want to tackle. And if we wait till next round, it's going to be even thinner. So we have to take this guy now, or we're not, or we're going to get lesser quality, which means less speed into the lineup, predictably. And so you saw a bunch of that, and we've said that already on a bunch of these preview episodes, like, well, a little early, but, if you waited, you were going to get less. So you had to do what you had to do because of supply and demand in the draft.
In terms of notable UDFAs after the draft, what are we doing on day 4, I guess you could say, of the draft, which is, well, actually it's really, it starts right after day 3 ends, but, going into day 4, that's when you see a flurry of UDFA signings. So who are the biggest ones that they got? We got British Brooks, the running back out of North Carolina, and then both of the Yankee twins from South Dakota State. All they did at South Dakota State was get open. They were not in my top, I don't even think they were in my top 40 receivers, but they definitely weren't in my top 35. But that's more a product of just how crazy deep this receiver class was. I still thought both of them were going to make rosters somewhere. And I didn't think that they were going to be on the same roster. They're probably both competing for one spot, but I wouldn't be surprised.
It's legal to get one of them. I think you have to get both. I think it's a package deal.
There is zero chance they both make the roster. One might. The other might be on the practice squad. What I'm fascinated by is which one is which. Which one makes it and which one's on the practice squad.
Here's what you do. You print up one Texans jersey with one number that just says J Yankee. And then whichever one's healthier or looks faster in practice, you just put him in it. Who's going to know?
I mean, they look identical. It's the same person.
It's funny. We talked to their offensive linemen and we're like, can you tell them apart? And they were like, oh yeah, absolutely. No doubt. They'd spent so much time with them that they were like, oh yeah, you could definitely tell. And they had all those little tells that if you've ever spent time around twins, you can eventually say, oh yeah, the personality. But yeah, straight up meeting them both first time, you're just like, wait,
There was a silent agreement at the Shrine Bowl of okay, Jaden's wearing the sleeve, Jackson's not wearing the sleeve, just so people could tell them apart.
Yeah.
Because, I'm talking same size, same speed. They look identical, which, again, they're twins. I get it. But it was legitimately hard to pick out which was which. There's not a discernible difference in terms of skill set to me. So, yeah, good luck trying to figure out which one's going to make the roster. I don't know.
That's an NFL loophole. Texans can actually have a, extra practice squad spot because they just stashed a Yankee.
Yeah, if one of them's banged up, you just swap in the other one.
Exactly.
Who's going to know? Who's going to know?
It's going to be perfect.
So overall, very strong April for the Texans. That brings us to our summary section, where we have 2 different pieces to this. The first one is answering the question, did this team get better? And, we have a thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs even rating for that. I think unequivocally, it's got to be thumbs up, right? This team is better than it was last year. They already won 10 games last year. They're more talented. They're deeper, second year in the system. I can't say anything but yes, better.
Yeah, I've got thumbs up as well. Stroud and Slowick combo year 2. Here we go with just better and deeper, right? Reminds me of when I used to work in the cycling industry and it was stronger and lighter. You're like, oh, really? Stronger and lighter? How original.
But not cheaper.
Yeah. Wide receiver core, better and deeper. Defensive line, better and deeper. Secondary, better and deeper. It's impossible to look at this roster. And again, just the progression, the experience of everybody, the coaching staff, the players, and not say they're even more of a threat this year.
So when looking at ceiling and floor then, which is the final section of this show, where we predict the ceiling and the floor of them in wins, how high is your ceiling for them?
13.
So first seed-ish. 13. Well, unless KC does KC things and wins 14 because they're fucking KC and I'm so tired of them. But
it's totally possible, but I think last year we were in the sort of 10-11 range and saying, hey, that's everything going right with a rookie quarterback, rookie OC. We get it, but, that's everything going right. At this point, I'm 13, and I don't want to say it's conservative, but I think it's completely possible.
I'm going to go, and maybe this is the damaged Texans fan in me talking. I'm going to go slightly more conservative and say 12 as the ceiling, which is still good enough to be a top 3 seed in the AFC.
Yep.
Likely, possibly, maybe. I still think it's, winning the division right? And then we'll kind of see where that falls relative to the other division winner records. But like, I think they're going to be in the mix for top overall seed, if not a top 3 seed. The floor, and it's funny how I say, oh, unequivocally, they're a better team now than they were last year, and they won 10 games last year. So it's easy to say, oh, the floor is 10 games. I struggle to say like, oh, a team's floor is double digit. Like, I want to reserve that for a very, very exclusive club of like, worst case scenario, you're a double digit win team. I want to be a homer and say yes, but I'm still putting it at 9 because it's possible there's a little bit of a step back,
Sure.
a little bit of a regression to the mean. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's possible.
Yep.
So I'm leaving the door open. More likely they're going to be on the top end of this range than the bottom end of this range, but I didn't want to be like such a shameless homer that I'm saying like, oh yeah, 10 wins at minimum. Like, we got this shit. AFC South is tough. Things can happen. You can be a 9-win team that's fighting for a 7 seed and still be very good. But I do think ultimately it'll be somewhere around 11 or 12.
We're still talking about a team whose floor, my floor, is 9 as well, that their floor is better than 500.
Yeah.
Right? In their second year of being together as a group. That's an outstanding football team. That is a very strong, very productive football team. When you're saying the worst we can see you doing with this assemblage of coaching talent and roster is going greater than 500 in the NFL, which we've talked about a lot of division winners who were either at 9 or 9 up until the last week. We had both last year. They're a very solid football team. We're saying the worst we can see them doing is 9 wins.
And keep in mind, that's with a healthy CJ Stroud. We're not really factoring in quarterback injuries to this, because if we factored in quarterback injuries for every team, it's like, well, yeah, the floor is like 5 games then for half the league. But if the quarterback is healthy, that's what we're saying the floor is. God willing, CJ is going to be healthy this year. Fingers crossed on that.
It's going to be a lot more fun if he is. And we say that. I know we get accused of being overly positive, but look, it's just better football. It's better football when the best players play. And it's better football when the best players play well. And we just want to see better football. We're just greedy that way.
Yeah. I mean, Chicago, Houston is Sunday Night Football, week 2. If you told me that 2 years ago, that the Bears and the Texans were going to be an early season Sunday night game, I would have called you crazy. But things change fast in the NFL. And hopefully all of them are on the field, because that'll be a damn good game. All right, we've talked about every single AFC South team in depth throughout this week. It's time to pick a division winner. You know me.
Yeah.
I have to go Texans. It's the best team we've had in many, many years. I'm not picking anybody other than the Texans to win this division. But for you, we've talked very positively about the Colts this year and what they've built.
Yep.
We've talked positively, well, maybe not super positively, but we acknowledge the potential of the Jaguars.
Oh, man.
And we also talked up, the active rebuild efforts of the Titans to kind of stabilize a very rocky ship, right? Who is your pick to win the AFC South?
I think it's really hard to pick against the Texans because they've already demonstrated it. The potential is there for the Colts to do it. Like, I'm just going to put my stick in the ground right now. I think AR is going to have a massive season.
Monster year. Probably,
like, big, like we're talking top level NFL award, candidate. That's the kind of year I think he has. If he has that kind of year, it's going to go down to the last little bit of the season and could go down to, tiebreaker, strength of schedule, whatever else. So I'll pick Texans because I think it's more chalk. Like, they've already done it. Love their coach, but Steichen showed an amazing ability in his first year to coach around, deficiencies in his roster and injuries and everything else. And I think AR is just primed to unload. And if he does, he can put a team on his back. And that's already a pretty good team.
He could put the other team on his back, literally. He weighs 255. Who's tackling him by themselves?
No. And again, Chris Ballard, all the things we said about Nick Caserio, Chris Ballard's been doing that for years. He's assembled a very good roster. There's a lot of talent around him. Like, this is going to be, I know not for you because you're a Texas fan, but this is going to be a fun matchup to watch for years. And it goes throughout the rest of the division too. I mean, said it, Jaguars with Trevor. Levis had flashes. Again, they've made changes in the coaching staff and the GM, surrounding him with more talent. He's got it this year. Like, it's certainly in the receiving core, certainly on the offensive line. Same things we said about this team. Like, this division is going to be an absolute alley fight for the foreseeable future.
As a Texans fan, I'm not looking forward to this season. I'm not looking forward to the anxiety that I'm going to face every single week because all these teams are good, or at minimum, all these teams are mid. And so it's not just a cakewalk to win the AFC South. It's going to be miserable for me.
Yeah.
And I know it's going to come down to the last week.
Should.
But for outside fans, for fans that are not, rooting for any particular AFC South team, this division is cinema.
Yeah.
Like, you have 4 young, very talented quarterbacks, aggressive, fast defenses, some really good offensive lines, some crazy skill position groups. They're going to be in prime time a lot. They're going to have legitimate MVP and Offensive Player of the Year candidates, potentially Defensive Player of the Year candidates all over this division. It's going to be extremely good television.
Yeah, I really think they're going to take the mantle from their AFC North brethren in terms of the division. It's just division games are absolute brawls, and you're going to see quote unquote upsets all the time where the team is not favored. Just, you can't, it's hard to favor anybody in that division. AFC North has been that way forever. They just beat the living hell out of each other. AFC South is going to be that way starting now.
That's why I think even if it's like a 3 seed or a 4 seed, like let's say whoever wins the South is the 3 seed. It's not your normal 3 seed. Like, they're going to be as good as anybody else. So whoever comes out of the AFC South, they will have earned it.
Yep.
And they will be one of the biggest threats to win the whole conference. Because if you win this division, it just means you're a really, really, really damn good team. It's also probably going to come down to the last play, just like it did last year. With the Colts and the Texans going at it, came down to one key play. I'd bet a significant chunk of money same thing's going to happen this year, just with even more stakes because all these teams are going to be better. Yeah. All right. Well, that concludes AFC South week. It's going to be one of my favorite weeks in this entire series for obvious reasons, but also just because these teams are really damn good. Yep. Next week is NFC South. I know some of you are considering taking a week off. Like, it's the NFC South. It's not super interesting. It's the Panthers. It's the Saints. It's the Falcons. It's the Bucks. No. Fascinating division. For entirely different reasons, but still a fascinating division. And there's some sneaky good teams in the NFC South. A lot of change in that division. A lot of young, explosive talent in that division. So if you're an NFC South fan, fear not. Somebody is actually going to be talking about you for once, and that's us. So make sure to come back next week for that. Thank you to Homage, our clothing partner. I'm wearing an Homage hoodie right now.
Oh, yeah.
It has a big old Texans logo on it. You're wearing your Damian Pierce shirt from Homage. So if you're a Texans fan or any other AFC South fan, you want to actively support your team while also supporting us on the side, anything you get at that link down in the description below, we get a cut of it. And not just NFL merchandise, but it could be bootleg merch. It could be, Legends of the Hidden Temple merch. Like I got my Legends crew neck from Homage. Anything you get, we get a cut of it. So thank you to Homage for also supporting us. Thank you to Underdog. Thank you to all of our executive producers on Patreon. Couldn't do this without you guys, longtime supporters that bought many and many a bottle of whiskey for us over the years and kept us going. Fun week.
Absolutely interesting week. Going to be an interesting division for a long time to come. And like you said, NFC South has some of, I think, the sneakiest best points of this entire series. I've written most of it already. There's some really fun nuggets in there, so come back for those.
All right, we'll see you guys on Monday.